everybody, welcome back to Wild Horizons. My name is Barrett, and in today's video, you are going to follow along with my journey and how I became to keep so many different reptiles and amphibians and other animal species. So make sure you stay tuned until the end. Alright everybody, well I appreciate you tuning back into this one. Again, today's video is going to be about how I came to keep so many different animals, how my passion started, what I did along my journey growing up from a little kid until where I am now, keeping all these different animals that we have. Again, we have right now sitting at about 80-85 animals, plus fish and other stuff too, so approximately like 80-85 animals. Those include reptiles, amphibians, mammals, dogs, you name it, we probably have it or have had it. But you're gonna follow along in my journey and how I came to keep all of these awesome animals, learn more about me, what challenges I faced, and how I became such an amazing keeper of all of these animals. So make sure you stay tuned until the end. Again, if you're new, make sure you drop a like down below, consider subscribing, but let's go ahead and get right into my journey. Alright, so my journey and my passion started at a very young age. So probably I would say the first memory I have is probably around 5-6 years old. Lucky enough, I was able to travel quite a bit when I was younger. Fortunate enough, my parents were successful enough to be able to take some trips. And my first big trip that I remember pretty vividly is going down to Florida. My Uncle Bill had taught me how to catch animals and catch lizards, and wherever I went on trips, I would always go out and catch stuff. So whether it was from wading in the water with a net trying to catch fish, or going in the Everglades and trying to catch different snakes and lizards and turtles and you name it, I was trying to catch it. But back early middle school, we took a pretty long road trip in our RV all the way out to the Grand Canyon. And we hit, southern states, went down, hit Arizona, hit the Grand Canyon. But I got the nickname of the Lizard Whisperer by my parents because wherever I went, I would always try and catch stuff. My stepbrother, who was not so much into animals, was like kind of the complete opposite of me. He'd want to always go and watch TV, watch sports. I was never really big or huge into sports growing up. I was later in my years in middle school and high school with soccer and lacrosse. But growing up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old is kind of when I started picking up soccer. But I did a lot of outdoorsy things like catching animals, and I still do to this day. But out in Arizona, I got the nickname from my parents of the Lizard Whisperer. So I remember going out and catching collared lizards and all different other kinds of lizards, and I would come back to our RV with probably 10-15 lizards at a time, and I would just have them all over me. These lizards, I don't know if they imprinted to me or what. Obviously they were probably more scared than anything looking back at it, not knowing what this huge creature was, catching them. But I would always hang out with these lizards, and I would go flip rocks and try and find snakes, and I'd obviously every now and then see something poisonous, venomous. I have a pretty funny story I'll talk about here in a second of a caterpillar, but we'll get into that in just a minute. But going out west, I would always catch stuff, so growing up as a kid, I always had a passion and a drive to catch and find animals, and the conservation side of it for me came at a later time in my life. Now I'm very into conservation with animals and keeping them and doing it the right way. Growing up, I didn't really know much about that. My parents, growing up when I was really little, even before I was born, they had a Burmese python, and it was about a 12-13 foot long snake. And to this day, my mom is not a huge snake person, so I have some ball pythons and constrictors, and my mom doesn't love handling them. So maybe I'll have a video of her actually handling some of my animals. Maybe I'll do like a blindfold and see if she can guess what it is. I think that'd be kind of funny. If you want to see that, drop a comment below because it would be pretty funny. But I would always, growing up, go out and try and catch stuff versus going and sitting watching TV or watching sports and stuff like that. So I was always super outdoorsy growing up, and still am. But you know, going out west was a great experience for me. I got to see a bunch of different stuff. I'll probably drop some pictures in now of some of the animals that I had caught and seen, you know, during that time when we traveled. I also had the opportunity to go to Alaska, which if you haven't been is an awesome experience. Tons of wildlife out there. I'll drop some pictures in now showing that too. This is a long time ago, so this is probably late elementary to early middle school when I was going out to all of these places. But we took frequent trips down to Florida, and Florida is where I would always catch a ton of wildlife: snakes, lizards, turtles, stuff like that. And growing up, I was on the east coast of Virginia, in Virginia Beach. It's where I grew up. And I would always go outside and catch stuff. So we're right here on the water, and luckily I had a bunch of buddies with boats and family members with boats, and I would always go out and fish. I got my scuba certification at a pretty young age. I got master diver when I was, I think, 15, maybe 14 years old. I went to this camp called Camp Kanakuk out in Missouri, and we did a huge trip down to Florida, and I ended up going for 3 years back to back to this camp. Got enough dives and certifications and qualifications to be able to be a master diver, and I was like the youngest person ever to go to this camp to get master diver. So I enjoy the water, I enjoy scuba diving, I enjoy animals. It's what I love. But growing up, I've always had that passion. But let's go ahead and get into this caterpillar story, because it's a pretty funny one. Alright, so caterpillar time. This was a trip that we took down to New Orleans. My brother was actually going to a Peyton Manning football camp, and in this camp we took our RV down to New Orleans and stayed in an RV park. And this RV park was like in the city, but it was a pretty big park, and we had a bunch of trees around, and there was a bunch of animals. So as me growing up and me loving animals, I was out all day long while we were at this RV park, and my stepbrother was out at this football camp, and I was catching animals. So I was trying to catch a bunch of green anoles and brown anoles and snakes, and I was going climbing up in trees, and I was netting around trying to catch stuff. And in one of the times that I had gone and netted in one of these trees, I missed the lizard, and I in turn caught this little tiny caterpillar. It's called a puss moth. I'm going to drop a picture now of what that looks like, but it just looks super furry. It's like a whitish kind of cream color caterpillar, and at the time I didn't know it was highly venomous. And of course, me as a little young kid trying to get this animal, a little caterpillar, off my net so I can go catch more lizards, I like shoot it off, and it got me good. It was in my finger, and as soon as it hit me, I immediately felt like a sharp pain in my hand. And it was pretty funny. My mom and stepdad were doing laundry and in this little workout room at this campground, and I was young. I was probably 8-10 years old, and I just go run into them. I'm like crying. This thing is like shooting pain up my arm, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Obviously I knew I got stung by this thing, and I ran and told my parents, and they did not believe anything that I was saying to them. My mom's like, there's no way you got stung by this caterpillar. You didn't get stung by it. And I was like, Mom, I did, I promise. Like, I was bawling my eyes out. This thing hurt. And so I went back and I got the caterpillar from the net because I wanted to show my mom what it was. She still didn't believe me even after I showed it to her. And to this day, she feels really bad about this whole thing. I'm sure she's gonna, in a future video, want to talk about it. It's just a funny experience looking back at it now. Day goes on, I have pain pretty much all day. I, again, have like shooting pains up my arm. I should have probably gone to the hospital at this time, or gone to a doctor to see what's going on. But the next day, we actually had planned to go to this reptile insectarium. And this is in New Orleans, and it was like one of the biggest and most well-known insect places on the East Coast. But we went there, and my mom was looking around, and at the front desk of like this main facility they have for insects is this like top 10 list of most dangerous and deadly, could be deadly, insects. And I think it was number 2 or number 3 was this puss moth. And I didn't know what it was called at the time, and I see it, and I see the picture right next to it, and it's like either number 2, number 3, and it's like highly venomous, seek medical attention if come into contact with it. And I'm like going over to my mom, like, Mom, this is it, this is the animal. And she still doesn't believe me, and she saw it because I showed it to her after I got stung by it, And she looks at the picture and she's like, oh my gosh, that is what it is. And the lady working behind the desk was like, you got stung by that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, my mom didn't believe me. She felt so bad at this time. And she was like, the lady behind the desk was like, we had a guy in here last week who was a doctor who got stung by it. And he had to go to the ER, he had an allergic reaction to it, and he had to get all this different kind of stuff done, and he had to go to the hospital for it, like, and was like put into, you know, care there. Anyways, looking back at it now, it's pretty funny, but that was a pretty funny experience getting stung by a caterpillar, and to this day is probably one of the worst, you know, reactions I've ever had to an animal. I've gotten bit by so many snakes and lizards and all different kinds of stuff, but this pus moth definitely was the top of the list when it comes to bites and things that I've taken on. And again, looking back at it now, it's a highly venomous caterpillar. A caterpillar by everything is like the worst pain that I've ever felt out of an animal. But anyways, pretty funny experience looking back. Let's get into one of my next experiences. Alright, so another funny story. My uncle, Uncle Bill, down in Florida, would always catch lizards with me. He was the one who taught me how to catch these lizards, how to go and catch these green anoles and brown anoles. And my stepdad's grandma was still alive at this time when I was really little. And she lived in an assisted living home. And I had gotten a big, huge, like Tupperware of all these, it was a big Tupperware of all these lizards. And I wanted to go show her what I had all caught. So I remember going into her retirement facility and into her room, and she had dementia at the time too. And I opened up the lid. All of these lizards got out in her room. It was hilarious, and she jumped up out of her seat and ran. I remember that pretty vividly, and these lizards were all over the place, and I was having to go catch them and regather them up. I didn't mean to open the enclosure fully, and like all of them got out. I remember like 2 weeks after that, she called my uncle and was like, Uncle Bill, I'm still finding lizards in my house. It was just a pretty funny moment that I remember growing up of those lizards getting away. It was just kind of funny. So, but yeah, let's get into the next thing about me. So the next thing, I remember the first ever animal that I got was a Honduran milk snake. My dad had actually got it for me. We went to this place called Animal Jungle, and if you're from Virginia Beach or this area in Virginia, on the east coast of Virginia, you probably know of or have heard of Animal Jungle. It is closed now, but it was an awesome place growing up. I remember going in there all the time, looking at the animals. They had all different kinds of stuff, from sharks to macaws to saltwater, freshwater, mammals. I mean, they had it all. And it was awesome going in there, and I finally convinced my dad to let me get this Honduran milk snake. Growing up, that was my snake that I had. Eventually, it passed. And then I didn't have an animal for quite a while, so probably from like 8 to 10 years old, I didn't have anything. I didn't have any animals because I was a kid. Didn't probably take the best care of all of my animals growing up. Well, I'll come back to that. But I remember this one time when I really wanted a bearded dragon, like really bad. I had gone in Animal Jungle a bunch, I had seen him a bunch, and I finally convinced my dad to think about letting me get one. And this was the game that I did with him. We played mini golf a lot. And to this day, my dad says I let him beat him. I let him beat him, he let me beat me. Anyways, I beat my dad. He didn't let me beat him. I beat him, fair and square, at mini golf. And whoever won, if my dad won mini golf, I wasn't going to get a bearded dragon. But if I won mini golf, I was going to get a bearded dragon. At the very end of that, we ended up getting a bearded dragon. I beat my dad at mini golf, but on the last hole, I said to my dad, I said, alright, if I beat you again at another round of mini golf, I get to get a second bearded dragon. And my dad said, there's no way you're beating me again. Sure enough, about a week later, after we got my first bearded dragon named Beardy, a very original name, I know, I beat my dad again at mini golf. Got a second one. His name was Lil. So I had Beardy and Lil. And they lived for a long time. Ended up giving them to one of my mom's friends when I got into middle school and high school and wasn't around as much in the house taking care of them like I should have been. But looking back, it was an awesome experience. I got to learn how to keep animals. I grew up with them. My parents grew up with them. Those are 3 of the animals that I had: the Honduran milk snake, the bearded dragons, and then a bunch of other just miscellaneous stuff that I'd catch over time and kept as pets, like you shouldn't do now looking back at it, but my parents let me. They shouldn't have let me. I have some other pretty funny stories too now that I'll share. So when I was in, I think it was 8th or maybe 9th grade, either I was right at the end of middle school or right at the beginning of high school, I really wanted some ducks. And this place called Tractor Supply sells them. I asked my mom and begged my mom, "Mom, please let me get some baby ducks. I really want some ducks." And we didn't have a huge yard to have them in. We had pool, and we had these ducks that would come back, these mallards, every year, and they would have babies and they would be in the pool. I'll drop a picture of them now. But I always wanted some baby ducks because we'd get in the pool, or we'd get in the pool and swim with them, and we made a little ramp for them to get out. They were just cool little ducks, and I really wanted some, but Pekin ducks is what they had at Tractor Supply, and my mom would not let me get them. So I came up with this elaborate story with one of my friends. I think I was a freshman, as I believe I was riding with my buddy in his car, and I said, "Hey, let's go to Tractor Supply, let's get some Pekin ducks." I ended up getting 2 of them, and I told my mom that, "Mom, I was out in, I was driving on the side of the road out in the farm area of where I live, and this mama duck had gotten killed on the side of the road, and these 2 baby ducks were there, and I rescued them." And she believed every bit of it. So what happened is I brought these baby ducks home, and I told my mom this story. Bold-faced lied to her. I shouldn't have done that. Kids, don't do that. If you're thinking about doing it, don't. But I did it. So I convinced my mom to let me keep them. And these ducks, what they did was they imprinted to me. So when I would go to school, all day long these ducks were just quacking away. And my mom hated it. So we had this huge enclosure built for them. I made and everything, and they imprinted on me. They'd follow me around, and they were cute. They were awesome. I mean, they would walk around and just sit there and hang out, and do their little thing in the water. They were awesome little ducks. If you have property, having ducks are awesome, but we definitely did not have the property to be able to keep these ducks at. So we lived in a nicer neighborhood where we should not have had these ducks. But anyways, that was another funny story, and eventually my mom's friend has a farm with a huge pond, and he ended up taking the ducks, not killing them or anything or using them. They're just pets, but he had them out on his farm for, I think they just passed away not long ago, but he had them out there for a long time. But that was just another little funny story that I had. I'd always catch little like snakes and turtles and stuff that would get into our pool, and I'd convince my mom to let me keep it for a couple days. So I always had like this empty 20 or 40 gallon enclosure, and I'd always make it this awesome little thing for whatever animal I found, and I'd keep it for a little bit, then my mom would make me let it go. But yeah, that's pretty much it on my funny stories. I'm sure I have a ton of other ones too that I'm not sharing. I've again been fortunate enough to be able to travel a lot and go to all these different places growing up and catch animals. I learned how to throw a cast net at a very young age, probably 6 or 7 years old. I was throwing like a 10-foot cast net. I had this Filipino lady down in North Carolina at this place called Camp Lejeune. It was on the Intercoastal, and I was always throwing like I kind of taught myself how to throw like a 5 or 6 foot cast net, but I could never really figure out how to throw like a 10-foot cast net at probably 7 or 8 years old at this time. And this lady, probably 4'11", maybe 5 foot, was like slinging like almost a 20-foot net, throwing it over her shoulder, swinging it, doing a perfect throw every time. And I just thought to myself, man, how is she doing that? So I finally got the courage to ask her for help. So she taught me at like 6 to maybe 8 years old how to throw at least a 10-foot cast net. It was huge for how big I was. And I remember bringing, in the Intercoastal, there's a ton of shrimp. And I remember my stepdad's like, "Oh, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to catch anything." And I probably brought back 40 to 60 huge shrimp. And I'm talking like cocktail-sized shrimp. And I remember his face, he was like, "Oh my gosh." And it was probably like $100-something worth of shrimp that I had caught in the span of a couple hours at night. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, growing up, I've always been an outdoorsy person. I always loved nature, you know, going out and catching different things. But I learned throwing a cast net at a very young age. Another funny story with the cast net is we had a beach house in Virginia Beach, and these guys were fishing off the coast, and I again was no more than 10 years old at this time, out there by myself in front of our beach house throwing a cast net, catching fish after fish, and puppy drum were in the area, and that's what these guys were fishing for. And I was throwing cast nets in these schools of puppy drum, and I'm wading out in the sandbar probably up to almost my waist at like 10, 12 years old, throwing this 10-foot cast net, and I was catching puppy drum after puppy drum after puppy drum, and I wasn't even keeping them, I was just letting them go. And these fishermen next to me were like, what the heck? They were getting so mad. And I was this little kid just reeling them in back and forth, and if I wanted to keep them, I could have. I had my license and everything to do it, but I didn't. I was just letting stuff go, catching it for fun. Alright, so the other thing that I did growing up was I volunteered at places. So I remember this one time we were driving back from our farm, again in North Carolina, and my stepdad, this is New Year's Eve, we noticed this owl on the side of the road had gotten hit by a car. We got it out of the road. Again, there's a funny story for that. I'm not going to share it in this video. If you want to hear more about this owl story, comment it below. It's really funny. But this owl story led to me wanting to volunteer at this place called the Carolina Raptor Center. It's one of the largest raptor centers on the East Coast. This place is awesome. They do rehab. They have a full veterinarian clinic there and everything. So they do rehabs. They do like teaching and stuff, and they have this summer camp. And I remember on one of my birthdays, I got a couple $100 as a kid growing up on one of my birthdays, and all of that money before I went to this camp I donated and sponsored a couple birds, and I thought it was really cool. So I wanted to go see these birds that I sponsored and spent all this money on. So what I did is my mom, thank you Mom, bought me this camp, or bought me this experience, bought me this camp. She let me go to this camp. So it's about 6-7 hours away from where I had lived growing up, and I went to this camp called the Carolina Raptor Center, and it was an awesome experience. This place is huge. They have hundreds of birds, probably thousands of birds, from bald eagles to hawks to, I mean, every kind of injured animal they would take in, owls, all that kind of stuff. But two of the animals that I adopted for like a couple months was worth of adoption fees. I got to go see in person, and I actually got to handle them too. So I did this camp, and it was like a week-long camp where I just learned everything about these animals, or the animals that we had kept and were caring for, and I got to learn the ins and outs of them. So I got to learn the feeding schedule, the care routine, what kind of medicine and stuff they needed, and all that stuff, and I was helping the keepers do all of this. And then we'd go out and try and find them and be able to identify them, and I learned a lot. There's a lot that goes into keeping animals. You know, raptors in general is, you know, much different than it is keeping reptiles, but even reptiles now, you know, as an older person, I'm not old by any means, I'm 25, but older than when I was a kid, like 7, 8, 10 years old, I know now that, you know, caring for animals is quite difficult. A lot of animals are not beginner reptiles. Like a lot of these places like PetSmart try to portray to people that like chameleons, you know, and stuff like that are starter animals. They're absolutely not. I wouldn't even say bearded dragons are a great starter animal. There's many other animal species in the reptile world that are better beginner reptiles. And I have videos out on that too, so if you want to check my channel out and go look at some of those videos, I have some best beginner reptile videos already up. I'm going to be adding to them in the future. If you want to see a particular, you know, comparison, or want to see a deeper dive in on some of the particular animals that you're interested in, make sure you comment below what that is. But I learned a lot. I mean, and growing up now, I know how to care for these guys. I know what they need. I know the space they need, what kind of heating, UVB, you know, stuff inside their enclosure, like substrate that they need, hides and stuff like that. And, you know, as a kid, I really didn't know that. I'm sure a lot of you don't know that too. And again, I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means. I mean, I can definitely grow, and I can definitely get better as a keeper, as I think that everyone can, not just with reptiles and keeping, but you can always get better as a person. You know, there's things you can do to grow. And, you know, if you want to learn more about an individual animal, again, I'm more than happy to share my experience. And there's tons of other people on this platform that have way more experience than I do. And you know, I look up to a lot of these people. I started this whole YouTube journey because of YouTubers I watched. So I've always loved filming and, you know, being able to interact with people and, you know, going on trips and being able to identify this certain animal that my parents had no idea what it was, and they would say, "Hey Barry, what is that?" And I would rally it off and know exactly what it was. Didn't know the scientific names or anything, I just knew what it was. But again, I've always grown up loving animals, and now having all of these animals and caring for all these animals, I know what goes into it, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work to keep this many animals, and it's a lot of work just to keep 1 or 2 animals. You know, my life revolves around reptiles and amphibians and other animals. That's what my life revolves around. So I get done with my 40-hour work week. Even after work, I come back home and I care for these animals day in, day out. I have to. But that's what I love to do. So if you have a passion, make sure you follow your passion, because they don't teach you this kind of stuff in school. You learn math, science, social studies, and economics and stuff like that. You don't learn about your passion. If your passion's animals, or your passion's to be a doctor, go chase your passion. You know, do what you love, because, you know, in life it's nice to be able to pay for bills and afford things, and, you know, I have a job to be able to afford that kind of stuff. But if your passion's animals, go after it. Just dive in, take the risk. You're young. Hopefully you're young watching this and want to learn more about these animals. If you're not and you're older, still take that jump. And my girlfriend just got done graduating college not too long ago, and you know, there's 40, 50-year-olds in her class. So even if you're an older person, go follow your dream. I mean, you have a passion in mind, go follow that passion. Always be passionate about what you do. So you're only on this earth for so long. So if you enjoy what you're doing and how you're doing it, you're gonna have a much happier life than if you're just sitting at a desk 9 to 5, or you're working, you know, day in, day out at a job you hate. You're not gonna enjoy life. So make sure you chase your passions, chase your dreams. But let's get into this next piece here. Alright everybody, well, I appreciate you sticking through this one. Again, I know it was kind of story time and learning more about me, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you maybe had a little laugh throughout. Again, if you're new, make sure you drop a like down below. Consider subscribing. It definitely helps out the channel. Again, if you want to learn more about me and want another story time, I'm more than happy to do it. It was fun making this video and reliving some of these funny experiences that I've had growing up. Again, make sure you chase your dream, chase your passion. If you're passionate about animals, passionate about anything, go after it. Take the leap of faith. You know, if you're young, make sure you take that leap early. You know, one regret in my life is, you know, going and doing all these things that I thought I liked and I thought I enjoyed, but in all reality, you know, doing animals and having all these animals with my girlfriend is my passion. So I get to share that with her, get to share it with my family, with my little siblings as well, and helping them teach and learn more about animals. So I appreciate you sticking through this one, but let's go ahead and roll the outro. Peace.